Hello, grade 6 and 7. Welcome back from your midterm. We are picking up from where we left off with Antonio Vivaldi. So this is a music history segment and we will be looking at his greatest work. So remember the little essay that I asked you to write and for you to tell me why you should listen to Vivaldi's Four Seasons. We are going to kind of test out some of the things that you pointed out in your essays, some of the things that you came across in the TED Ed video that I asked you to watch, because this is known as one of the greatest classical pieces. And we know it's very different from all the other Baroque composers because Vivaldi wasn't as interested in very complicated layered instrumental lines, right? He wanted music to be more relatable. He wanted the layman, the common man, to be able to listen and be entertained by this music. So something he was able to achieve that Bach and Handel did not and could not achieve was giving imagery to the musical lines. So we were able to actually imagine, or listeners are able to actually imagine what is going on in the storyline behind the melodies that he composed. But before we get there, we're gonna listen to two of the concertos together, and I'll explain what a concerto is. So we're going to listen to Winter and Summer together as a listening activity. But before that, we need to define what a concerto is. So the Four Seasons is 4 concertos that are played beginning to end. That means if one performer and an orchestra play the Four Seasons, it'll be about 45 minutes long, okay? So the whole thing together is the Four Seasons that represent spring, summer, winter, and autumn. So a concerto is when one instrument, and in this case, the violin, is a star instrument, the main instrument, and then you have an orchestra, other instrumentalists that support it. So we're going to try and see whether the poetry that Vivaldi wrote matches up to the melodies and the little tricks that we hear within the music, whether we can actually imagine what Vivaldi intended for us to as we listen. So the first section of the Winter Concerto that we're going to listen to, Movement 1, is known as Allegro Non Malto. Now this is the poetry behind it. Frozen and trembling in the icy snow, in the severe blast of the horrible wind, as we run, we constantly stamp our feet, and our teeth chatter in the cold. So let's hear if this music, this performance, gives us these images. So right from the beginning, we hear what are known as trills. So those quick notes. And what does it make you imagine? Trembling, right? It sounds kind of icy, silvery. Okay, the music is getting louder. Do you remember what we call that? It's a crescendo. So what is happening here? The violin, our main instrument, our star instrument, has come in very suddenly. And in the poetry it says, in the severe blast of the horrible wind. So what is Vivaldi doing to create this severe blast? Number one, the violin comes in quite loud and suddenly. And then we're hearing very hurried notes. And these hurried notes are, for the most part, descending. Right? We're hearing them going up and down. But as we continue listening and this storm becomes a little bit more violent, we'll start to hear more of the descending notes. Okay? Listen very carefully to how the music is swelling and how high the notes are, how choppy they are, because all these things contribute to this cold feeling, this shivering feeling, and people running in the cold, because it says that in the poetry. We run, we constantly stamp our feet. So listen. You can hear those choppy notes. So that could be the running. So everything that I just listed, we talked about the hurried notes, we talked about the higher notes that are very choppy, we talked about how silvery the notes sound, and then we talked about the swelling in the dynamics. Now if you notice, even as we move on to the next movement, the second movement, which is largo, it means slow, you notice the lines are very melodic, they're singable. So if you listen closely enough and you learn the melody, you can actually hum along to it, because that's how relatable the music is, even though there are many notes. It's easy to pick up on. So let's listen to this a little bit more, and then we will move on to largo, movement 2 of our winter concerto. Okay, so now let's move on to largo. So the poetry for largo says, to spend happy and quiet days near the fire, while outside the rain soaks hundreds. So let's see if we will get a sense of warmth and happiness near the fire, and if we will be able to imagine rain pouring outside. Okay, so what do we hear in the background? We're hearing picking notes, right? There's little notes that are being picked on the violin, and that makes us imagine raindrops, very, very light raindrops. And then we have the melody of our lead violinist that covers over all of that, though we still continue to hear in the background. And the melody gives us a sense of comfort and warmth and quietness and peacefulness. So you could even say the picking in the background is a crackling of the fire as well. Yes? So we're hearing a lot of things that give us a very different mood from what we had in the first movement. Something that also makes it very distinctly different is that it's in a major key. So the first movement was in a minor key, the second movement is in a major key. Minor, we've talked about this before, a while back. Minor gives a song a sad, a bit more depressed or dark sound, and major gives it an uplifted sound. Okay, let's move on to our third movement. This movement is Allegro, which means quick. The poetry says, "We walk on the ice with slow steps and tread carefully for fear of falling. Symphony, if we go quickly, we slip and fall to the ground. Again, we run on the ice until it cracks and opens." Okay, so let's hear first if we get a sense of these slow steps on the ice, treading carefully. So this piece has begun with a sense of suspense, right? There's low notes in the background that are droning out, and then there's this high melody that is very lyrical. There's a lot happening in it, but it still gives us a sense of waiting for something bad to happen, right? So you can imagine those slow steps while everyone is afraid to fall. Oh, something's about to happen. This is important. So if you notice, there's once again a pattern of descending notes. And this time we're hearing an echo. Da-da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da. So that echoing makes it feel like things are falling over or stumbling, right? So we need to pay attention to how the notes are moving because that contributes to the images. Okay, so here there's a long passage, but it sort of concludes in what sounds like a fall. So there's a lot of tripping, and then finally we kind of hit a low note before she comes back up again. Okay, so that's Winter. I will definitely leave the link for you to listen to this whole performance, to watch this performance as well, because it's done so beautifully, and I think that visual will really be helpful to you. Okay, Summer. We're only going to look at one movement from Summer, and it is also called Allegro Non Malto. Allegro Non Malto. It's the first movement, and this is the poetry that comes with it. So this is a poetry that comes with movement 1. Under the heat of the burning summer sun, languish man and flock, the pine is parched. The cuckoo finds its voice, and suddenly the turtle dove and goldfinch sing. A gentle breeze blows, but suddenly the north wind appears. The shepherd weeps, because overhead lies a fierce storm and his destiny. Okay, so we need to be looking out for something that will sound very heavy and slow moving, because there's heat, and heat makes people feel tired and lazy, right? The pine is parched, so that means the heat has been so much to the point where even the plants feel it. The plants are wilting, and then all of a sudden we'll hear some really quick notes because the birds have come through. Now maybe this will make us pay more attention. Before a thunderstorm, what are the birds doing? Let's listen. he tells us about the birds that are flitting around. I don't know if you could sense that from those quick low notes, and then the higher notes that resemble the sounds that birds make as they move. And then all of a sudden there's wind, right? And it comes in quite strong. Well, this could be some of the wind, but also the birds again. The wind is picking up. Alright, here's our shepherd. Okay, so we get a sense of sadness, and the melodies are very lyrical once again. And you could almost sing these melodies that she's playing. Now, I don't know if the shepherd is weeping because he's so grateful that it's about to rain, or if he is fearful of the flooding that might ruin all the crops for his flocks. So either way, I think you're getting the idea. There's so much in this music, which is what makes it great and timeless. And I will have you listen to Summer as well. And I will write out the poetry for you so that you can read it. You've been reading it on the screen, but I'll also give it to you as a document that you can download. All right. So thank you very much for listening. And make sure you're taking notes. I hope you've been taking notes, because I had a lot of things up on the screen for you that are important. Because at the end of the term, when we're doing an accumulative assessment, we'll be looking at all the information from Bach, Handel, and for Vivaldi, there might be a question like, what does Vivaldi use in his music to create the imagery of rain? So you'll need to be able to have some descriptive words like what I've been sharing with you today. All right, enjoy listening and see you next week.